Hi everybody, this is Professor Paul Hicks talking about philosophy again, and today we're going to talk about truth and what is truth. So we've talked a little bit about arguments already, and what we're looking for in an argument is that if the premises are true, do they support the conclusion, and are the premises also true? Well, then it raises the question for us, what is truth? What does it mean for any sort of proposition or statement to actually be considered true? So let's think about this for just a bit, about what truth might be. So the word true can have different meanings, and let's try to bring down what meaning I'm trying to get at here. So what if I was to say, be true to yourself? What does that mean, to thy own self be true? Right? That's not the kind of truth that I'm talking about. Or is it, take the statement, is it true that you're a true friend? Well, what does it mean to be a true friend? Loyal? That's not the type of truth we're talking about here. So the type of truth that we're talking about is going to be the type of truth of whether a proposition is true or whether a proposition is false. So for example, my car is red. That is a proposition. That is either a true statement or that is a false statement. Right? Those are the types of propositions we're trying to get at. Seattle is north of Los Angeles. Is that true or is that false? The capital of California is Sacramento. Is that true or is that false? All right. So let's think about this here. We need to lay down some real basic axioms about what truth is so that we can try to come up with a theory that can explain truth to us. So let's go ahead and lay down these three axioms. Number one, it's what we call the law of the excluded middle. That is, every proposition is either true or it is false. So all propositions, that is, all statements have a truth value. That is, they're either true or they're false. This doesn't matter whether you know whether they're true or false. The fact is that they either are true or they are false. So for example, take the statement, God exists. Well, some of you believe that to be true and some of you believe that to be false. You're not both right. It can only be one or the other, right? It is either a true statement or a false statement. The second axiom that I want to talk to you about is what we call the law of non-contradiction, and that says that no proposition is both true and false. So, right? So there's all statements out there, all propositions. There's not one that is both true and false. So if we were to take the statement God exists, it's not possible for God both to exist and God not to exist at the same time. That doesn't make any sort of sense. All right, and here's a third axiom, which is going to be a little more controversial, but I'll give you a reason why I think you should support it. And that is, a truth value is relative to a particular point in space and time. So, for example, if I take the proposition, we had chocolate cake on my son's birthday. Well, that could be true depending on the particular birthday you're talking about. It could be true, say, on his third birthday, but false on his fourth birthday. There's a particular point in time and space where that truth actually is. Okay, that's going to be challenged, that particular axiom, and all of these axioms are going to actually have some sort of problems, as you're about to see. So let's go ahead and talk about some problem cases here. So the first problem case I want to talk about is any sort of sentence that contains a paradox. So if I was to say what is this very famous paradox called the liar's paradox, this statement is false. Well, there is in fact a proposition or a statement. That is, this statement is false. Is that a true statement or a false statement? Well, if it's a true statement, then what it says about itself, specifically that it's false, is accurate. So if it's a true statement, it has to be a false statement. But if it's a false statement, then what it says about itself is accurate and therefore is a true statement. So now we have a statement which appears to both be true and false at the same time. What are we supposed to do with that? Right? So this seems to be a problem. Another problem that we actually have is, what about any sort of ethical or aesthetical statements? So ethical statements say murder is wrong, rape is wrong, something along those lines. What makes that true Where are the corresponding facts of reality, right? Where are the facts of reality that make that true? If we're really supposed to have a truth value relative to a point in space and time, where is the reality of murder is wrong? What makes that a true statement? What facts are there to be had? And the same thing can be said about aesthetics, about a beautiful idea, say like the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's a beautiful idea. Or a beautiful person, or a beautiful dog, or a cute little bunny rabbit. Are there truths that that's a cute little bunny rabbit? And if so, what does that mean? How can we interpret that? Okay, so there's some potential problem. Another potential problem that we have when trying to understand the theory of truth is predicting future events. So remember, if we state certain propositions which predict future events, so for example, if I was to say, you will get an A in this class when this course is over if you complete all the work well. All right, well, is that really true? Should you work to try to complete all the work well? You seem to think that it's true because I gave you a syllabus about what you need to do, and I told you if you do these things, I'll give you this grade. So it seems to be true, but since that future event has not occurred yet, it has no point in space and time, and therefore has no truth value. But notice you should still work to try to get an A. You should still work to try to do the best that you can in this class if that is what you're trying to do. All right, so there's a problem with predicting the future events. Another problem that we have is what we call counterfactuals. Counterfactual is a statement that goes counter to the facts. That is, for example, it's a statement of if X were the case, then Y would be the case. But notice what you're doing is you're saying if X were the case as if it's not the case. So if X is not true, is the only way that we could give meaning to if X were true, right? But that entails for us or presupposes that X is in fact not true. So here's an old ad slogan. If I were an Oscar Mayer wiener, then everyone would be in love with me. Well, we start off with the truth of I am not an Oscar Mayer wiener. But notice, though, if I were an Oscar Mayer wiener, then everyone would be in love with me. That is, in fact, a counterfactual. Do counterfactuals ever have a truth value? If they go counter to facts, how could they possibly have a truth value? Wouldn't they always be false? So, for example, if I was to say something along the lines of, if I never went to graduate school, I would not be a professor today. Well, is that true? It seems to be true because you need to have gone to graduate school and have a graduate degree to be a professor. So that seems to be true. But the reality is I did go to graduate school and I am a professor, so therefore, what are we saying about that counterfactual? Right? It seems like the counterfactual is true, that if I didn't go to graduate school, I wouldn't be a professor. But it goes counter to the facts because I did go to graduate school and I am a professor. See what I mean? So this gives us some sort of problem for what we actually have. Another problem case that arises when trying to understand truth is references to any sort of non-existing objects. So if I was to say Santa Claus lives at the North Pole, that seems to be true, even though I don't expect to go to the North Pole and find Santa Claus. Or if I was to say, you know, the Easter Bunny is a large rabbit, right? Or the Tooth Fairy collects teeth. But those seem to be true statements, even though there is, in fact, no Santa Claus, no Tooth Fairy, etc. No Easter Bunny. What if I was to say Oliver Twist is an orphan? Sherlock Holmes is a detective. That seems to be true, but I would not expect to go to the orphanage rolls in London and find the name Oliver Twist, just as I would not expect to go there and find a detective named Sherlock Holmes. But it is a true statement. One way that we try to understand this is that we talk about, there's a theory called fictionalism, and we say, well, these statements are true given a certain fiction within a certain story, Santa Claus lives at the North Pole within the story would be true, whereas say if Santa Claus lives in Rio de Janeiro would be false because it's not part of the story, right? Something like that. But notice is what's happening here is you're starting out with a fiction and you're starting out with an actual falsehood. Okay, so let's talk about three main theories for truth. We're going to talk about correspondence theory, we'll then talk about coherence theory, and then we're going to talk about pragmatism. So what I want you to understand is there are very smart people which hold all three of that hold one of these three theories. Right? They're very smart people, very smart philosophers that hold one of these three theories. I'm going to give you the theory. I'll give you some basic objections to them. But there are people that have responses to these objections. If you want to learn more about this, please go on into a university and study philosophy. It's a very, very rich subject. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the first theory, correspondence theory of truth. This seems to be a rather intuitive understanding of what truth is supposed to be. So a statement under correspondence theory of truth is going to be true if and only if it corresponds to a fact of reality. Right? So for example, if I was to say my car is red, well, that is only going to be true in the instance that I have a car and it's in fact red. Now, here's a problem. Let's say I don't own a car. And I say the statement, my car is red. Is that a true statement or a false statement? Well, it seems to be a false statement. Right? If I say my car is red but I don't own a car, it seems that I said a falsehood, right? Well, here's some problems. Think of a statement like 3 is prime. Is that a true statement? It seems to be a literally true statement, doesn't it? Where are 3's? Where is a number 3? Where is 3-ness? Right? If correspondence theory is true and all claims, all statements must have corresponding facts of reality, then what is the corresponding fact of reality to the statement 3 is prime? There's no 3's, but yet it's still true. Another problem is going to be ethics. Does ethics actually have some sort of truth to it, or is all ethics simply relative? So if I was to say raping little kids is wrong, I think that's a true statement. And if you don't think it's wrong, then I think you did something, you're incorrect about that. But if you're going to hold all ethics as relative, then no ethical claim has any sort of truth value. And that seems to be rather dangerous. At least it's not going to have a truth value under correspondence theory. So while this seems to be rather intuitive, there really are some problems with correspondence theory, right? So maybe what we could do is we could come up with another theory. And philosophers have developed another theory called coherence theory. Now, coherence theory suggests that that the world of facts and the world of statements and our beliefs about those statements is what correspondence talks about. But coherence says if then that these claims, coherence claims, all right, so coherence theory of truth states that a theory or statement is true when it coheres or mutually supports another set of statements already held to be true. So we could get rid of correspondence here for a bit and try to look at, well, do these statements mutually support other statements that I know to be true? So for example, if coherence theory goes like this, we have certain beliefs in our head. So certain beliefs in my head I have, you know, my car is red, murder is wrong, hamburgers are tasty. All right, these are a lot of thoughts that I have going on in my head right now. Now, say somebody gives me some new information. Now, what am I going to determine whether or not that's true? What I do is I check it against other statements I know to be true, and if it doesn't contradict those statements, I accept it as being true. But if this new information contradicts the statements I hold in my mind to be true, then I hold it to be false. So for example, if I take the statement, my car is red, and let's say I really believe that, and then somebody says, well, you have a blue car, that's going to contradict the belief I already hold that my car is red. And therefore, the proposition I have a blue car would be a false statement. All right, well, there's a lot of problems with coherence theory of truth. One problem for coherence theory is going to be, where did your first belief come from? Right? You notice that coherence theory says that any new proposition will be accepted as true as long as it mutually supports other propositions held to be true. Well, there had to be the first proposition that you held to be true, didn't you? Where did that proposition come from, and what made that true? Right, go back into the history of all of your ideas. There must have been a first idea. That first idea had a truth value that you held to be true, but what made it true if you had no other ideas by which you could mutually support it? Okay, so there's a potential problem. Another potential problem is, for coherence theory, is that you could hold all sorts of false beliefs, and if I was to introduce another belief which is false, it would actually mutually support other false beliefs, but you would hold that to therefore be true, even though all your other beliefs were false. So for example, let's say that I am delusional, and I believe that aliens and the CIA are coordinating with each other, and that I have to be there when the aliens land because they're going to take me away. All right, this would of course all be false, but let's say I actually believe that. Now you come to me knowing that I am delusional, and you say, hey, I got a message, the aliens are landing tonight, be ready. Now there's a new idea, a new proposition, a new statement. Is it a true statement that the aliens are landing tonight? Well, coherence says, does it mutually support other statements you hold to be true? Well, yes, it does. I believe the CIA and space aliens are coordinating together, and I really do believe the aliens are going to come down someday and take me away. And now when you tell me that the CIA told you the space aliens are going to land tonight, that mutually supports my other beliefs, and therefore that would be a true statement. But it's not really true, is it? So once again, how is it that we're supposed to determine if a statement is true if all the mutually supporting statements you thought were true are actually false? See, we have some sort of epistemological problem here, right? We have an epistemic problem here. How do you know your other propositions are true in the first place? All right, so there's a problem there. All right, now I want to go ahead and get to the last theory here, and the last theory is what we call pragmatism. Pragmatism, comes about 140, 150 years ago. It is a new way of thinking about truth that I think are going to have some problems with it, but there are some good things about it. So a pragmatic theory simply holds that truth holds a belief is true if and only if it leads to the successful solution of a real problem. It leads to the successful solution of a real problem. If it doesn't solve the problem, then it's not true. All right? So think of it this way. Some people like to argue, for example, that how is it that I know that the physical world exists? Well, in some sense, I may not ever truly know if I'm going to be some very hardline skeptic. But I know that it exists, and I would say that the statement is true that the physical world exists because I act or interact with it, and it seems to solve problems for me. It seems that my belief that the physical world exists seems to be true, right? It seems to be true. Well, if that's the case, then from a pragmatist standpoint, it is true. See, if it works for me, if I'm able to successfully solve problems by asserting certain propositions, then it's actually going to be true. Okay, let's think about this, all right, for a minute. So there's a pretty popular objection that comes from the philosopher Bertrand Russell, one of the great philosophers of last century. And in discussion of the pragmatist William James, who we're going to talk about later in the semester, he argues that James is really just mixing up the notion of truth with epistemology, right? Because pragmatism describes an indicator or a sign of truth. It really cannot be regarded as a theory of the meaning of the word true. So, right, there's a difference between stating an indicator and giving the meaning. So, for example, when the streetlights turn on at the end of a day, that's an indicator that evening is coming on. But it would be a very obvious mistake to say that the word evening means the time that the streetlights turn on. That's not the meaning of evening. It's an indicator and not the meaning, right? When the streetlights come on, it's an indicator that evening is arriving. But we wouldn't say that that is therefore the truth and the meaning itself of evening. So ultimately, Russell's objection is that pragmatism mixes up an indicator of truth with the meaning of the predicate true. There is a difference between the true, and pragmatism confuses them. Another objection to pragmatism includes, how do we define what it means to say a belief works, or that it is useful to believe? This seems rather vague, and William James talked about this, and we'll talk about this later in the semester, but it does lead to a lot of debate. A final objection on pragmatism is it seems to involve relativism. That is, what's true for you may not be true for me. You understand? So, for example, let's talk about, say, God exists again, the very common philosophy example. So, imagine an atheist debating a theist. And the theist says, at the end of the debate, that I do not want to live in a world where God doesn't exist because it brings me comfort. Okay, notice that it brings the theist comfort. So from a pragmatist view, the statement God exists is true because it brings them comfort. It's a successful solution to a problem. For the atheist, though, it doesn't bring comfort, and therefore the statement God exists is false. So now what do we have? We have a statement of God exists as true, and we have the statement God exists as false. Is that possible? Can that statement be true for you but false for me, or true for me or false for you? It seems kind of problematic now when you're starting to talk about truth in that way. So look, ultimately we have these kind of problems. I'm not here to tell you which one of these theories to actually endorse. I'm not sure I fully have really appreciated, after the 25 years of studying philosophy, which one I fully endorse. I see value to all of them, but there are some problems with it. So anyways, I know it's a rather abstract concept of understanding truth. I hope I was able to break it down for you a little bit more. If you have any questions, once again, feel free to email me, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.